Let's talk about Hamato Yoshi in my Ninja Turtles universe. Hamato Yoshi was a strong and noble ninja warrior in feudal Japan over 500 years ago. Taken in at a young age by the head of the noble Foot clan, Oroku Maji, Yoshi grew up alongside the Oroku children, Saki and Tang Shen. Upon reaching adulthood, he and Tang Shen had fallen quite head over heels for each other, and he proposed, and she agreed to become his wife. And together, they would have 4 beautiful children. Hamato would spend the duration of his boys' lives training them in the many arts of ninjutsu that the Foot clan taught. But then disaster struck. The boy's grandfather, Oroku Maji, died suddenly, and his son, Oroku Saki, became the head of the Foot clan. And Saki, who had for so long fought for truth and justice alongside his brother, Yoshi, suddenly just grew dark. The Foot clan turned from a peacekeeping force into one of conquest. They became almost a carbon copy of the clan that they had eradicated almost 30 years ago, a clan led by a man named Takeshi Tatsuo. When Tang Shen tried to speak to her brother for going against their father's wishes for the Foot clan, Oroku Saki struck his sister. This infuriated Hamato, who leapt in to defend his wife, and he and Oroku Saki fought. Now, because of this, Oroku Saki then ordered his brother to pay amends for this dishonor, and he ordered Hamato Yoshi to be the one to lead the attack on the nearby shogun who Oroku Saki was trying to overthrow. Hamato told his brother no, and Oroku Saki branded the entire Hamato family as traitors. The Hamato clan escaped north and lived there for quite a few years, almost a full decade. The boys were now all in their teenage years, but they were found by their uncle. And Oroku Saki made his brother watch as he executed the boys and Tang Shen right in front of him, before finishing the job and killing Hamato Yoshi. However, after what should have been a fatal blow, Hamato woke up and found that he was no longer on the countryside near his house. He was in a peaceful garden, a beautiful garden. And standing there in front of him was Tang Shen. He didn't understand what was happening until he realized what she had realized not long before. They were in the afterlife. They were in the good place. They had gotten to the good afterlife for living good lives. Yoshi and Tang Shen tried to live good lives in this afterlife, but something felt wrong. And that was because their sons weren't there. Their sons' souls weren't in the afterlife with them. And so for centuries, the soul of Hamato Yoshi searched for his sons. And then one day Yoshi felt something, a calling. He knew what he had to do. He ran to the large tree in the middle of this garden. He closed his eyes and placed his hand on the tree. And when he opened his eyes again, he was an infant rat. Over the course of about a year, Hamato grew into a fully mature rat. He had been reincarnated in the body of a rat in New York City. All of this was brand new to him. But he wasn't just reborn as a rat. He maintained all of his memories, the centuries of afterlife, and the years living in Japan. He was a sentient soul, a human soul inside the body of a rat. And even stranger, he felt a pull, a calling to the TCRI building in downtown New York. Now, eventually he managed to get inside the building. He walked around for a little while. He didn't know why, but he just knew he had to go to this place. And eventually he figured it out. Because one day while scurrying through the air vents, he looked down into a lab and he saw 4 beings he knew he recognized. 4 infant turtles. And even though it seemed crazy, this was a man who was just reincarnated as a rat. He knew, the second he laid eyes on these, he knew these were his sons. This is what he's been searching for the last 500 years. He finally found them. Yoshi snuck back in every single day to check up on them. They seemed like they were being taken care of. He tried to contact them, but they didn't seem to retain the memories of their former lives. They seemed to just be turtles. But Yoshi wasn't gonna quit. He kept visiting his kids. He'd bring them extra snacks and extra lettuce because Michelangelo seemed to love that shit. And over the months that he kept sneaking in, watching after his boys, Splinter earned a respect for the doctor that was taking care of them, Ms. O'Neill. She wasn't mistreating them. She seemed to genuinely care for these turtles. And even though she was doing tests on them, they all seemed to be very humane, very nice, no harsh punishments or anything for getting anything wrong. Just genuinely making sure that they were turning out as best they could. However, the other scientist that kept coming in, Baxter Stockman, Hamato Yoshi did not like. After spending 500 years in the afterlife, Hamato had developed a sort of evil sense. His whiskers just stood up whenever that man entered. He knew Baxter Stockman was doing evil things. And so when Baxter took his sons, bringing them to another experiments, by the way, that Splinter had seen. Splinter had seen the monstrosities that Baxter Stockman was cooking up in the sub-levels of TCRI. Splinter knew what he had to do. He leapt in. He attacked that man. But when he did, they got sprayed with ooze. Splinter was covered in it. The turtles got covered in it. Splinter grabbed these four, just as a rat, not much bigger than these, but he managed to drag them all out of there, out into the alley. But tragedy struck there too, because while they were out in the alley, they were attacked by an alley cat. A cat by the name of Old Hob. One that had been trying to kill and eat Yoshi every single day since he started snooping around TCRI. As Yoshi was dragging the turtles out and putting them in a safe place, when he brought the last one out, he'd realized one of them had gone missing. Raphael. And when Yoshi looked around, he saw Old Hob with Raphael in his jaws. Old Hob bit down with a disgusting crunch and snapped, fractured a piece of Raphael's shell off. And that sent Hamato into fatherhood overdrive. He leapt onto the cat and bit out its eye. But in doing so, he also covered the cat in mutagen. Yoshi dragged his sons down into a sewer. He found a nice little pocket. It seemed to be an abandoned subway station. He found a nice little nest that he made, and he kept the turtles in there, unsure of how he was going to keep them alive, but knowing that he would find a way. And then they all fell asleep for the night. And when they woke up the next day, everything had changed. The first thing he noticed was that the nest was infinitely smaller. And the second thing he noticed was the reason why. It wasn't smaller. He was bigger. Probably almost 5.5 feet tall. He managed to find a reflective surface and look at it, and he wasn't a rat anymore. He was a rat man. And then that reminded him of his sons. He went back to the nest looking for them, but couldn't find them. But then he heard laughter coming from around a corner. He ran through the tunnels following this laughter, and he found 4 seemingly teenage-looking turtle men? And Yoshi knew those were his boys. Over the next couple of weeks, they developed the ability to speak, the ability to think. Their intelligence was increasing rapidly, almost exponentially to the more stuff they were exposed to. They managed to get hold of a TV, and they all started watching cartoons, and within 1 week of finding that TV, they all spoke fluent English. Although weirdly, it seemed to be really heavily influenced by what they liked to watch. Michelangelo had watched a whole bunch of 90s movies on VHS that he'd found, and so he kind of talked like a surfer. Leo watched superhero cartoons and just sort of spoke pretty seriously. Donatello couldn't stop watching documentaries, and Raphael couldn't stop watching gangster flicks. And as Yoshi talked to his boys, he realized they really don't. There's nothing left in there of his 4 sons, but they were still his sons. Everything about, they acted exactly like his kids used to. It just really seemed like they had amnesia. And even weirder, they seemed to still retain some of the memories of TCRI, so they all remembered their own names, which they'd already been responding to in trials with April, and so they stuck with them. And because they all had new names, Splinter was given one too, specifically by Michelangelo. Michelangelo had just tripped and hurt himself on a nearby junked pallet, and he got a splinter from it. And when Yoshi was taking it out of his son, explaining what it was, to this guy's sort of still forming mind, to him, that was this guy identifying himself. So he just started calling him Splinter, and then the boys started copying their brother, and before he knew it, that's just who he was to these four. He didn't really want to change it because they still called him Father or Splinter interchangeably, so he was pretty good. And now that he had his boys back and they were alive again in this strange new world, Yoshi just wanted to keep his boys safe. He forbade them from going outside. He continued to teach them in their ninjutsu, which they all remembered nearly instantly. So even though their actual memories seemed to be gone, weirdly enough, they somehow got their muscle memory back. And in less than 6 months, they were all back to peak fighting condition, Splinter included. And that's how things went for the first couple months, until the boys escaped one night because they just wanted to know where they'd come from. The boys went to TCRI to find April because they still had memories of her. And when Splinter went out to find them, he saw something. He saw a gang called the Purple Dragons facing off against a fighting style he recognized. And when one masked assailant took down 6 purple dragons in front of his very eyes, Splinter's heart froze in fear, because standing in front of him was a lone female warrior with the Foot Clan sigil emblazoned on her back. It had been over 500 years, and the Foot Clan had found them again.